he needs to abdicate and he needs to take some time for his own health, and that it's inhumane that he is being allowed to carry on. I don't think it's fair on him. I don't think it's fair on the country. The palace is involved in the most titanic gaslighting exercise.
Developing today, the British monarchy in transition, as King Charles's cancer battle is far worse than the British mainstream media are reporting. These new pictures showing the monarch at Fortnum and Mason overnight have caused more concerns about quite how bad his health is deteriorating. What we are seeing behind the scenes in the royal court is a swift movement from Buckingham Palace towards Kensington Palace. What's fascinating, however, is that you won't read about this, you won't hear about this in the British mainstream media, because broadcasters and newspapers, part of that royal rota made so infamous as a result of the criticism by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, have signed up to effectively a vow of silence. Now, I haven't. As you know, neither has Lady Colin Campbell or my guest today, Tom Sykes, who is the European editor-at-large for the Daily Beast, but also the man behind the brilliant Royalist Substack. And Tom, you were thrust out of the International Royal Rota because of your refusal to bow to the demands from Buckingham Palace and not report on what is really going on with King Charles's health. Now, what's interesting to me, and I'm fascinated to know how you feel about this, of course, there is a divide, even amongst my audience, about whether we should be talking about this at all. You know, some people do sign up to the idea that actually King Charles has a complete right to privacy and dignity when it comes to his health. But you say this is really a a tale as old as Shakespeare. The health of the monarch and this type of transition is something which is very much in the public interest. And as a result, you have been reporting that there is really a swift movement going on, a swift shift of power from King Charles to Prince William and Catherine, and even Prince George, which we're seeing in lots of ways, which again remain unspoken. So, Tom, firstly, what's your reaction to the new pictures of King Charles? I know you have been concerned about quite how bad his health is.
My honest reaction, Dan, is that he needs to abdicate and he needs to take some time for his own health, and that it's inhumane that he is being allowed to carry on. I don't think it's fair on him. I don't think it's fair on the country. The palace is involved in the most titanic gaslighting exercise. Everybody can see with their own eyes what is happening. Anyone who has two eyes in their head can see that Charles is losing weight, that he does not, that he looks really weak, that he's struggling. If you talk to any of the press pack who follow him, the appearances now are like that. They are so quick. He's in and he's out. Um, as I understand it, things have got a bit worse in since the kind of late summer. Things were better earlier in the year, and he was showing up for longer and doing more things. He's very tired a lot of the time, and I think that if it was you or I who were in this situation, our doctor would call up our partners and they would say to them, look, this person needs rest and recuperation. They need to focus on their recovery. They need to be kept away from sources of stress, and that is the best chance for recovery in a long life. And I also think, by the way, that Charles, frankly, has made such a titanic mess up of his entire reign, and I feel very badly for him. I know he's waited his entire life to do this. He was handed effectively a beautiful, perfect china bowl when the Queen passed away, and within 3 years, the whole thing's in chaos. It's a complete mess. The handling of the Andrew situation has been disastrous. The handling of the Harry situation is going the same way. To read the British newspapers, you'd think that it's all been a great triumph and it's been marvelous. Well, again, it's like I just feel like we're told, it's like the palace, like don't believe, look around my eyes, look around my eyes, don't look into my eyes. It's like we're told not to believe the evidence of our own eyes, and it's just, yeah, as you say, I was kicked out of the International Royal Rota. As you know yourself, it's no great hardship not receiving press briefings from the palace these days, because it's completely degenerated
Well,
into
it's
Pravda,
propaganda.
basically. It's
100%.
completely, it's
100%.
just
I mean,
complete nonsense.
I've always operated outside the Royal Rota. I personally think it has been the best thing I've ever done. When I launched Outspoken, I said I will break the exclusives that the Royal Rota won't. I mean, the only reason I was able to break Megxit, for example, back in 2020 was because I was not part of the Royal Rota. When it comes to King Charles's health,
And by the way, the Royal Rota rubbished you and said that story was all rubbish. But the thing about royal reporting is that you have to stick your neck out, and you do sometimes have to say what's going to happen based on what your sources are telling you. And, in the fullness of time, you're proved right or wrong. But it didn't take very long for you to be proved right.
No, I mean, that
one.
was a lucky one. It was only 24 hours. But I mean, there were a lot of other stories, of course, where I was initially rubbish. For example, the late Queen Elizabeth II exploding at Harry over the behaviour of Meghan Markle. I was, in the lead up to the wedding, I was rubbished on
Very
that
good example.
for a long time. But see, I don't agree with you, Tom, on the abdication. But what I think needs to happen is for Prince William to operate as a regent. I mean, do you think that is already happening in some way? Or, and I presume this is what you're going to say, Charles is too desperate to hold on to some of the things, things that he thinks allow him to be seen as monarch, when actually they should probably be being passed on to William more formally?
I think that actually, Dan, both things are happening at the same time. So I think that Charles is very keen to continue in the job that he was born for and that he waited his whole life to have. But I do think that it's very clear that increasingly a lot of strategic decisions are being routed through William's office and William's approval. Of course, we saw that with the Prince Andrew thing. I mean, it was an absolute debacle until William got involved, frankly, and got him out. And I mean, Charles has been sitting on the fence about that for 3 years. And when William got involved, it was done and dusted inside a month. So, and I think that William is increasingly making a lot of the big decisions. But I think that Charles, I don't know whether, I don't honestly, I don't know whether stuff is being kept from him by his aides who are trying to protect him from stuff. I'm sure he doesn't, watch me or you on YouTube. I'm sure he does. I think I'd have spotted it if he subscribed to my Substack. But I think that he is only presented with the front pages that say you're doing a marvelous job, sir. And so I think that both things are happening at the same time. I think that Charles thinks he's still the king, and I think that William knows that he's really the king, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think what happened with, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as we call him now, that was the most obvious example, wasn't it? Because in just a fortnight, Charles's solution unraveled, completely and utterly unraveled. And if Charles had just listened to the advice from William, this actually could have been an incredible moment for him, because he could have actually dealt with it all at one time, but he didn't. And obviously, I do have sympathy for the fact that he didn't want to destroy his brother's life. And I do understand, and I don't know how you feel about it, Tom, but I do understand the briefing that Prince Andrew's mental health does have to factor into those decisions, because, of course, we do not want another suicide when it comes to this story. But in saying that, if Charles had just listened to his son, just like he should listen to his son on Harry and Meghan, everything could have been dealt with so much sooner.
Well, I think what's so interesting, Dan, is that they don't really talk. It's like it all goes through the private secretaries. There's very little face-to-face communication between the two. They don't really get on. There's always been difficulties and a very strained relationship between them. Again, you're not going to read any of this in the papers. But I mean, again, how could it be anything other? When what those boys went through as kids.
I know, and Tom, this is where the Royal Rota is so frustrating, because do you remember when you were reporting about 6 weeks ago, and I was too, about the increasing strains between Charles and William, which is just a fact, right? I mean, Charles completely ignored his eldest when it came to the meeting with Harry. And so then this meeting was engineered, do you remember, for COP? And the royal Rota believed it and ran with it, hook, line and sinker. You know, they're closer than they've ever been. And like, of course there is love between them as a father and son. Of course there is. But it didn't take away from the fact that their relationship professionally is dysfunctional, has been dysfunctional for a long time, and with Charles's decline has actually got worse rather than better.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the most egregious example of it. Now, I have friends who work in the Royal Rota. They're good journalists and all of that, and it's a difficult situation because they need to retain their access to the palace. So there is a bit of a diplomatic job, and it's all that said, whilst you know there's many fine people working in the mainstream media and doing good jobs, and you know let's be honest, a lot of Prince Andrew coming down was thanks to the incredible work done by journalists at the Mail and the Mail on Sunday, your alma mater, Dan, and but the way that they massage and manipulate and just go along with the kind of nonsense put out by the Pravda machine at the palace was, for me, very clear. So I'd written a lot about the strained relationship between William and Charles. Tina Brown picked up on it and she wrote about it. And then then the Mail picked it up and other people started running it. And then mysteriously this story appeared that William was going to Balmoral for a kind of what was pitched as like a kind of brainstorming super conference with his dad, where they were going to spend time huddled over, you know, long walks or what have you, and they were going to come up with the future of the monarchy. It was like the Way Ahead group all over again. And within hours, I wrote a story saying it was all complete nonsense, that William was staying in a different house to his father, who he wasn't even staying at Burkle, he was staying at the big house. And B, William had all his mates up and was going grouse shooting. That's why he was up there. He was up there to go shooting with his friends. He wasn't there to have a brainstorm conference with his dad.
No.
Like, it's just rubbish.
100%.
And this idea that you can't fit a cigarette paper between them, it's nonsense, you know, and it's...
Well, indeed, and we saw it with Harry, but by the way, and I would argue that William was proven right within days. It's like immediately after the meeting, right? The briefing came to the American media. Then, do you remember, Tom, the whole premise of agreeing to the meeting from Buckingham Palace's point of view was based on the fact that Harry would finally move on from his security battle with the British government and the Home Office because of the terrible position that put Charles in. Well, the moment that a new Home Secretary was parachuted in, Ms. Shabana Mahmood, all of that went out the window and Harry started lobbying again. So it was just a ridiculous position, I think, that Charles put himself in, and William was proven right in that case. But first, a reality check. Data leaks aren't a once-in-a-while story anymore. They're constant and they're massive. When a mega breach hits, millions of people's details spill at once. Phone numbers, home addresses, even sensitive stuff. Worse, that data doesn't fade away. Data brokers and people search sites buy and resell it endlessly. So scammers, stalkers, even curious employers of your future can pull up your life within a quick search. That's why I use Incogni. In a murky industry, Incogni is the proof-driven service independently verified by Deloitte to request removals from hundreds of broker sites and private databases, follow up repeatedly, and log the confirmations as they come in. Here's how simple it is. Create your account and share only what's needed to find your exposed profiles. Authorize Incogni once, just once, to act on your behalf. They start the takedowns and keep chasing so your data doesn't creep back online ever. And the power feature custom removals on the unlimited plan. If you spot your info anywhere, so court portals, company directories, people search pages, drop that exact link into your dashboard. Incogni's privacy team then takes it on beyond the automated list. Unlimited links handled by specialists. It's low effort, it's effective, and it gives you real peace of mind. They can't target you if they can't find you. So don't wait for the next breach. Head to incogni.com/outspoken right now and get 60% off an annual plan. That's incogni.com/outspoken. Protect yourself, your family, and your future. But now, back to the show.
But what a friend of William's said to me, he was right about Andrew and he's right about Harry.
Yeah. Yeah. Without any doubt. And that's the thing. It is inevitable. And there is, I think, a growing feeling that it is inevitable. I mean, if you look at Robert Jobson, great guy, but certainly one of the reporters who is closest to the king, and the king's
and Camilla
circle, and Camilla indeed, revealed the fact that they were getting married first, and very, very long relationship. Even Jobbo is now openly acknowledging that Harry, by the age of 50, will be a bald commoner, effectively.
Yeah.
There is an acceptance that the title just will not remain under William. But Charles doesn't want to do it, doesn't want to go there.
Well, I think what changed with the taking it away from Andrew, the argument before had always been these titles are bestowed by God, right? This was the argument. They're bestowed by God and no man can take them away. And suddenly, actually, it turns out they're bestowed by an act of, monarchical executive order, and they can be taken away. And in fact, they can be taken away in 10 days. So suddenly the conversation shifts and it doesn't become, why do these people have these titles? It becomes, why should these people continue to, give me a reason why they should not have the titles.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It was done in 5 minutes, Tom. It was done in 5 minutes.
If it could be taken from Andrew,
no parliamentary time.
No parliamentary time. Nothing. It was just a letter, a note in the London Gazette.
This transfer of power and transition, though, we are seeing it in so many ways. And of course, we saw it when Prince George was alongside his mother and the king for the Remembrance Day celebration. But then this week, I was very fascinated by your take in The Royalist on Substack in regards to Catherine and her big speech. And you wrote, I think we just got a tantalizing glimpse of Queen Catherine. The Princess of Wales' confidence suggested to me that she knows exactly what moment she is stepping into. And there were just two key moments of the speech, Tom, which you thought really illustrated that. I've put them together. Watch this.
Love is the first and most essential bond. Imagine a world where each of these environments were built on valuing time and tenderness just as much as productivity and success.
So, Tom, you found that speech very significant. Talk to me about what you know.
I thought she was brilliant, actually. I thought she was really cool. And I think, I'm not a huge fan, right, of the winter, summer, spring videos. I think that it was a mistake not to peg them to a particular cause, which I think would have made them a bit easier to understand, would have made the framing a bit more obvious, because it feels a bit like they've just randomly, these videos have appeared. This, to me, feels like all the messages within those videos, which is basically a sort of, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but it's a sort of slightly sanitized version of mindfulness, isn't it? It's like, let's all take time to smell the roses, right? And but because it's kind of signposted properly to us of being within the context of the sort of culture of come on, guys, the rat race. Do we really all want to give our entire lives up to the rat race? Or do we want to raise nice kids and have nice families and have a happy life? I mean, it's certainly not a groundbreaking message, but it is it's the medium, not the message, isn't it? It's the way it's been presented by her. And I kind of love the idea of the Princess of Wales marching into the Salesforce Tower, marching into the lair of the tech oligarchy and telling them all, back off and let us raise our kids and let us have our free time. And, maybe 40 hours a week is enough,
Well, yeah, I see
really
such a contrast with Meghan as well. And by the way, I'm not saying that's behind Catherine's message, but I think it has crystallized it in a way. I mean, it's like you've got this one real duchess, real royalty who's effectively saying, look, the most important thing in the world is love, but also time, and you don't need anything. And that's where I think the nature seasonal videos come in, Tom, because it's like, well, you don't need anything apart from nature, and we all have nature, Now, obviously, some of us have more of it, especially if we've got, lovely estate in Norfolk, for example, rather than being in a, skyrise council house building in Tower Hamlets. But, the point being, we can all, in this country, at least in the United Kingdom, find some form of nature and spend time with our family. And that is the message. Now, the contrast of that this week, Tom, with Meghan, and I know you were very shocked by this, because I very much liked your Substack on it, but literally hawking her children for Thanksgiving, in this Thanksgiving sort of article, effectively selling sage honey, right? I mean, the contrast of those two women could not be greater.
Yeah, I mean, look, that mail shot was one of the craziest. If you're trying to say that your brand is about the primacy of your family and the privacy of your family, and that you want to, your whole thing is being good mom, and your whole thing is your family, right? It seems, and that you're not going to show your kids pictures on social media because they have their right to privacy and all this kind of stuff, then what I've always felt is there's a huge contradiction in the I'm not going to show the kids on social media. Well, actually, I am, but I'm just not going to show their faces, which actually builds even more excitement and interest about what they look like. Plus, by the way, you don't need AI to fill in what the kids' faces look like. Your brain will do it for you. We now all have a very, very good idea of exactly what those kids look like, right? Because that's how your brain works. It fills in the gaps. So just putting a sort of smudge over their face doesn't do anything. But the point is that it became a very conveniently performative way to have your cake and eat it, right? To sell the fancy of the kids whilst pretending that your main goal is protecting their privacy. And the two kind of collided this week in this email that was sent from As Ever, in which she kind of talks about running through the fields with, and mentions them by name, Archie and Lily, and then a dog's name's Poola or something, Mia. And I'm like, do you not perceive do you not perceive the sort of incredible hypocrisy and contradiction of saying on one side, that your children aren't for public consumption, and that this is the whole reason you had to leave the British royal family, because your kids were being served up to the media. And on the other side, you're actually putting them in emails to sell $32 jars of honey. And if you contrast that with the privacy that is afforded the children of the Prince and Princess of Wales, who drive their kids to school every day and drop them off, and they play sport and they play matches and have complete privacy, it's, it all starts to look incredibly hypocritical and self-serving, I think.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Very much a contrast. Look, we are in fascinating times, Tom, and this is why I think you do need the independent coverage of the British royal family. And obviously we provided on Outspoken, and I so love the work that you do on the Royalist, which I obviously recommend via my Substack, but you can just find it very easily. It is, if you search for the Royalist Substack on Google or on Substack, and it is a growing platform. It is a really brilliant platform, actually, and I love what you do. And I think it's so great, isn't it, Tom, that we don't have to rely on the mainstream media anymore. Like, yes, of course, if they break a great scoop, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to consider it, is it accurate? Where has it come from? But I do just think, even in the space of royal reporting, things are changing, and they're changing fast, because the narrative is no longer being set by the British newspapers anymore.
And I think, Dan, it's a really good point. And I think it's very incumbent upon us who come from journalistic backgrounds. There's plenty of people on YouTube just talking complete nonsense and just setting up their camera and sending out a load of clickbait rubbish. And I think it's actually very important from people who come from proper journalistic backgrounds like me and you to remember that we are still journalists, right? And that what we do has to stand up to scrutiny, and that people are entitled to challenge us, and people are entitled to, try and poke holes in what we do. And I think it's absolutely critical now that the independent media that is emerging holds itself actually to much higher standards than on some occasions that the mainstream media has in the past.
Very good point. Very, very good point. Tom Sykes, European editor-at-large at the Daily Beast, also the man behind the Royalist Substack. Thank you so much, Tom. Please come back soon. We love having you on Outspoken. Really, really